So I really believe that Reiki is the cure for burnout because this Reiki healing energy was really born out of burnout. And so a lot of times when I ask a group of students, like at the beginning, like what is bringing you to Reiki, it could be 9 times out of 10, people are like, "Oh, I'm just experiencing burnout," and your answer kind of aligned to that too, just saying that, you know, just wanting to overcome the grind of like the fast-paced grind and come into a slower flowing state. And I've heard all kinds of people who are like worn out, tired, sick. And usually it's that they're just sick of their life, sick of their job, sick of their roles in life, being a mother, worn out, just sick of it all and just not having energy. And it's funny because twice I came to Reiki. I found Reiki when I was extremely burned out. And this is just my origin story, just to let you know how I came to find Reiki. And then when I delved into learning more about Mikao Usui, who is the originator of Reiki, he found Reiki. And a lot of Reiki classes that you'll take out there in the world, they'll never even mention Mikao Usui. And I pay big homage to Mikao Usui as the person that created it. And he was a very spiritual man. He's, even though Reiki's not a religion, he was a very spiritual man. And he was both a Buddhist monk, but he also studied the teachings of Jesus Christ. And there's a lot of studies of these like symbols that were used for healing and some of the more esoteric teachings of Jesus Christ that are sort of hidden from us now. But this was at the turn of the century, and these writings were available to him because he was of a high order monk and he was able to access these hidden teachings of Jesus that included these symbols. And then in Buddhism, they had these similar healing symbols. And he thought, oh, that was interesting. So he was already studying about that. And then Mikao Usui had this moment of extreme burnout because he was working at the monastery, but he was also a physician in the medical system in the turn of the century, helping people to heal. But it was like during that time they had the plague and people were just dying on his table. And to be a physician and just see people dying all the time. And so I love to tell this story of how Reiki was first began and then just compare it to my own personal burnout story and the stories I've heard from so many people. And Dr. Mikao Usui, he went to the abbot of the Buddhist monastery he was working at, and he said, I just can't do it anymore. I can't be a doctor because I just can't see people die on my table every day. It's so depressing. I'm so burned out. And so he said, I'm quitting. I just have to quit. I'm going to leave the monastery. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And I feel that so many people who come to Reiki are at this crossroads where they're like, I cannot do the thing. That is really a theme. I've been teaching Reiki for 20 years, and that is a theme. People go like, I'm here because I'm going to get a divorce. I can't be with this person. Or I'm here because I got to quit my job. I cannot do this thing. It really comes to you when you're at this huge crossroads of like, I can't do the thing, and I just need to quit because I'm burned out. So that's exactly where Dr. Mikao Usui was. And the abbot told him that he needed to climb Mount Karuna in Japan and do a 21-day meditation to really check in with himself, to get really quiet, to get really still. And as I'm teaching this right now, we're at the summer solstice, and this is a time of year when we have this kind of crossroad. They call, solstice means the sun, and stis means a still point. So we're at this really powerful still point right now, and that's where Reiki takes you as well. It's a kind of like what's come to balance, come to this still point, get really quiet and figure out your next step. And I like to read, this book is from my Reiki master teacher, and I just like to read the story just as it was traditionally written. Dr. Usui climbed one of the most sacred mountains of Japan, Mount Karuna, and he meditated for 21 days. On the first day, he placed 21 stones out in procession in front of him because he was fasting. He wasn't eating any food, and so each day he would throw a stone away so he could have a record of time, so he didn't go too long. And I just love the symbolism. I think that would be a beautiful thing to just put 21 stones out, and then each day you just throw one out on the top of a mountain. And we've got a mountain behind us, so it feels very like in sync with this mountain. And on the 21st day, Dr. Usui was saying like, okay, I'm at the end of my meditation. I don't know, what's really going to happen, but I'm just going to get up now, and he went to stand up. And as he stood up, this beam of light came from the sun, and it just hit him right in the heart, and he just fell back. And the light was so strong, and then the light was like those Jesus clouds where you get the light just pouring at you, and the light was just pouring in on him. And then when he looked up to the heavens, he could see several gold circles, like gold coins with symbols in them, just emblazoned in light. And he recognized those symbols as the healing symbols that he had studied when he was studying the teachings of Jesus and Buddha alike. He was like, those are the symbols of healing. And those are the Reiki symbols that we still use today to do Reiki attunements. But he was really having the first and original attunement. And it was like really a spiritual experience of having this light come in and then really visualizing the symbols. And he was just soaking it in, just breathing it in and taking it all in, as if the sky itself was just attuning him. And although he was afraid by what was happening, because he could feel all the things, just like we feel when we get an attunement today. It was like, oh, I feel all this stuff happening. As the light was shooting towards him and all these emotions were coming up, he didn't move. He just sat with it. And he was just struck by that light that had knocked him over. And the light just kept pouring, and just sort of these waves of light coming at him. And in that rapid succession, those symbols were flashing in front of him. And the symbols were like burning themselves into his memory. And I did have a student who, when she had her Reiki attunement, this Reiki 2 attunement, and we did the symbols, and I draw the symbols in her hand, she said, I saw them in the sky and they just burned in memory. And she never even had to study the symbols. They were just burned in her memory. Just like what happened, this is what happened to Mikao Usui. He saw them and the light was shining on him so strong that the symbols just burned into his memory. And when this whole experience, this trance was over, it went on for like an hour of him just receiving this light energy. Dr. Usui no longer felt exhausted, stiff, or just starving hungry like he had just moments before he went to stand. He suddenly felt refreshed, energized, and his whole body just was like beaming with radiant health and well-being. And so then he got up and he began to walk down the mountain to climb back to the village. And on his way, he stubbed his big toe really hard. And it tore back the toenail, and blood was just gushing out. And he jumped with pain, and he grabbed his toe with his hands. And suddenly his hands got really warm, just holding his, and this was like the original self-Reiki done by Dr. Mikao Usui when Reiki was just discovered. And he just sat there and held his toe and felt how warm, this warm ball of energy around his toe, and his toe was just warm and healing. And then he removed his hands and all the bleeding had stopped and his toe was no longer in pain. And he knew, because he is a medical doctor, he knew that this was really bizarre. Like, this doesn't happen. Toes don't heal that fast. The bleeding doesn't stop without being bandaged. But that was his original, like, oh my gosh, the Reiki just did something. And then when he got to the little village, when he came off the mountain and was into the village, he stopped at a food vendor's cart and he ordered himself breakfast. And the owner of the cart said, oh, I can tell by the look of your beard that you've been meditating, so give me some extra time to prepare your food because I want to make sure it feels good when because you haven't eaten. And then the food vendor's daughter came out and her whole side of her face was red and swollen, and she had tears, like she was crying, like she was in pain. She had like dentistry at the turn of the century wasn't great either. She had some kind of dental infection or something happening. And he said, I know this energy healing, I just discovered it like 20 minutes ago, but I want to do this thing. And so he goes, could I just hold your face and see if we could heal it? And she said, sure, why not? And so he held her face, and that was the original first time anybody had ever given Reiki, was Mikao Usui held this girl's face. And within moments, he could feel the warm energy coming in through the top of his head, pouring into his hands, right into her face. And she said, oh my gosh, it feels so good. And all the redness and pain and swelling was just gone within 5 minutes of holding this woman's face. And so he knew, he was suddenly like so inspired. He knew he had something that could actually make a difference, could actually heal his patients, and maybe his patients wouldn't all be dying on the table even if they have the plague. He could do this healing energy. So he went back to the monastery, and of course, as soon as he gets there, he says, I got to talk to the abbot. I have this new way of healing. I'm so excited. And they said, the abbot is laid up. He's got arthritis. He's got a really bad case of arthritis, and he's in bed in extreme pain. And so Mikao Sui's like, well, I'll just go heal him right now and tell him about it. And so he goes to the abbot and he lays hands on his back. And within, one day, he's already healed 3 people, himself, this woman, a stranger, and the abbot, his friend. And this is what happens so often when you get this Reiki attunement, as you just had. All of a sudden, it's like, all of a sudden your cat needs healing, your kid needs healing, your coworker has an injury. You will find, once you've had a Reiki attunement, everywhere you go, there's people who need your healing touch, and you're just giving healing touch, and then you're seeing clients, and then the clients are just coming to you. You're like a magnet to heal people. And that just happened for Mikao Usui on his very first day in the origin story. Like, he's just had these beams of light coming at him, and he's already going out into the world and healing people. And it's like, people know you're a healer now, and they're just magnetized to you. It's like, oh, can you heal me? Because I have this thing. And you're like, all these people are coming to me for healing, and I don't even have to advertise. People just come to me. I'm just like a magnet for people who need healing. And it has really been since I started doing Reiki. And I came to Reiki from a social work background. And I think all social workers, teachers, nurses, talk about extreme burnout.
Yeah.
And I used to work at, had my psychology degree, and I was working at a group home with teenagers, a lot of suicidal teenagers and at-risk kids. And then I was getting my master's degree, and I was just starting the program to get my master's degree in psychology. I wanted to become a therapist, counselor. And there was just that one kid that, I always had really good boundaries, energetic and emotional boundaries with these kids. But there was one kid in the group home that just really pulled at my heartstrings, the one that I just loved the most. Mm-hmm. And she was in our program. She graduated our program. She was sort of our success story. But she was always suicidal, and she always had this story. It's funny, people have their stories. And her story was always, I'm going to die when I turn 18, just like my mother. Because her mother had given birth to her when her mother was only 16. And this poor young baby was only 2 years old when her mother killed herself with a drug overdose at 18 years old. And from that moment on, at that young 2-year-old age, it's like she embodied her mother's story and said, that will be my story too. And we tried to talk her out of that story. We did so much therapy around that story. It's like, cancel. That doesn't have to be your story. Even if it's a story you've been telling yourself for a long time, you can change your story anytime. You can change your story. But she was fixated on that was her story. She would die at 18. And sure enough, she had graduated onto foster home. And on her 18th birthday, she got into the medicine cabinet and overdosed and killed herself.
Oh my God.
And it was so sad, and I just couldn't do social work anymore. And I was experiencing the greatest burnout of my life. Like, I just didn't know. Like, my whole life had been, I was going to go and study psychology and then become a therapist. And this was my trajectory, and it was all I ever knew. It was all I ever wanted. And now I just didn't know what I was going to do. And I ended up moving to Seattle and entering this beautiful work, going to work at a beautiful massage school, REIKI massage school. And then my boss said, you know, you got to do the massage program. And within a month of starting at this massage school, I saw that there was an elective, and it was Reiki. And I didn't even know what that was. I mean, I had no knowing. I had never had a Reiki session. I had never even heard of the word Reiki, but I was drawn to the name. I thought, oh, what is that? That sounds interesting. And when I got that very first attunement in that first Reiki class, it just opened my heart, and like all the energy came flooding back. And I thought, okay, I'm starting a new trajectory. It was a crossroads for me, because I was not going to do social work anymore. And I did not want to be a therapist. And that work was too hard. It was too emotionally draining. I'm too empathic and emotionally sensitive to do that kind of work. And I knew that I was at this incredible crossroads, and the Reiki found me in this crossroads still point and said, we're going to go this way now. You know, we're going to do something totally different. And taking that Reiki class was when I really stepped into becoming a healer. But it immediately got me out of burnout. But what really surprised me the most about Reiki for me was that it completely helped me manifest. And that's why I wrote this book, Reiki for Abundance, because Reiki brought me greater abundance for the first time in my life, because I came from this background of, I was raised by a single mother, and I had all those limiting stories too. My stories were like, well, you just work so hard and there's never enough money. And you you just are just always scrapping to get by, and like you might not have, you know, just survival, just really in that survival, because my mother was a single mother. And I feel like I was raised like going like, are we gonna make rent this month? You know, like I was raised in such scarcity. And my mother, just like the girl that killed herself, had her mother's story that was so limiting, and she lived out that story. I had these deep-rooted stories that I had to work so hard, and I couldn't do, my parents told me, like, you can't do work that you love, you just got to get a job that pays your bills, and then you can have hobbies, and I was like, I want to do work that I love, but that story wasn't quite available to me. And when I got that Reiki attunement, and I got that infusion of light, it raised my energetic vibration, so that those stories were like down on the ground, and I was raising up to this higher vibration where I was like, oh, anything is possible. I can do work I love. I can step into becoming a healer. I can make money doing this, and money comes to me easily and effortlessly. And I had been doing law of attraction and all that kind of stuff. Like that was at the time when The Secret came out, and everybody was trying The Secret, you know, and I was trying those things too. But The Secret never worked for me, because I realized once I got that Reiki attunement that The Secret is like, you can change your mind, but if your energy doesn't rise to reach it, it's really about being energetically aligned to the things you want. If you're in a state of scarcity and fear, your energetic vibration, there's that whole energetic vibration scale, you know, from fear and hate and negativity is down at 0, and joy and love is way up here. And somewhere in the middle is like manifesting everything you've ever desired. And you can't get to here from there with thoughts alone. And that Reiki attunement is just that energetic opening of your heart. When your heart is open and now you're receiving this golden light energy, and then you're just rising up, and then all of a sudden things just started showing up for me. I was like, money was just coming to me. I was a money magnet, and I was getting all these like I had so many side jobs when I was in Seattle, and there was just all this things that I wanted were just showing up. I wasn't even trying. I wasn't using my thoughts to create things. Things were just coming because I was an energetic match to a higher vibrational thing that everything that I wanted to manifest, I was becoming more energetically aligned to it. And so that just pulled me right out of burnout. But then I did have a second burnout that brought me back to Reiki. I went on to become a massage therapist. I started my own practice, super busy, manifesting all the clients who wanted the Reiki. I was only Reiki level 1 for years. And my teacher, who was an amazing Reiki master teacher, she left Reiki to start a Buddhist monastery in Washington. And she's the head of an incredible Buddhist monastery. But I sort of lost my teacher. I was like, oh, now she's a monk. I have to become Buddhist. And I wanted to get that level 2 right away, but she was gone. And then I was kind of looking at other teachers, and I hadn't really found anyone. And maybe it just wasn't the time for me to take Reiki level 2. Like it just didn't align. And I was just working really hard, doing lots of sessions, making lots of money and everything. And then I met Bill, and we had a child. And when I became a mother, and I was having this, small infant to care for, caregiver syndrome, and then going to work and healing people and caregiving, I had extreme caregiver burnout. And so once again, I was at this crossroads where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. To care for this child, to care for my clients, to care for myself, I'm just exhausted. So once again, at the crossroads of burnout, Spirit whispered, it's time to become a Reiki master. And I thought, you gotta be freaking kidding me. I'm so tired. I can't even get out of bed, let alone go take all the classes that is necessary to become a Reiki master. But then I found my teacher, Rose DeDan, and she's an incredible teacher in Seattle. And she works with a lot of animals. So after you get a Reiki attunement from me, animals will follow you home. You will have lots of animals will show up. I have so many animals. We have people, one of my friends goes, your house is the cat house. Because all these stray cats come to our house for healing. But it's, I don't intend to be the cat house. They just come. They all need healing and love. And so I met Rose, and then I went on to become a Reiki master. And that just, once again, I needed to get to the next higher ring of energy. And then once I did that, I started manifesting. Then we manifested buying a house, and we manifested all these other things to raise up even higher. But I really do believe that Reiki is the cure for burnout, because Reiki was right here with Dr. Mikao Usui, born of burnout. Mikao Usui was burned out when he found it. And so there's this magnet that if you were burned out, you were going to find Reiki. Do you have burnout? Do you think you might have burnout?
Yes. Yeah, from teaching, and then just a lifetime of caregiving.
Yes. And being a mom and a working mom.
Being a mom and a
it's so hard being a working mom.
High demanding religion, a high demanding marriage,
Yeah.
And
you were at a crossroads when you had your first Reiki session too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I left in December to take a medical leave, and it's the best decision I've ever made. And crossroads. So now I'm like, now what do I do? Yeah. Where do I go from here?
And the Reiki's gonna guide you. I think it really will. Yeah.